democracy is a discussion. And this is a place that starts from that position and then invites the thinkers and the writers and the talkers together to engage in democratic action, which begins with thinking and speaking together and remembering where we came from, where we are, and where we're going, because they're all connected. And in the Church of What's Happening Now, which is 24/7 television news, wonderful, we can get so focused on the present that we forget the importance of the past to the future. So I want to thank David, and I want to also thank Raina Blankenhorn for the spectacular work she's done to make this evening possible, and by the way, to make this room possible. And I also want to thank the staff at the Institute that has just done an outstanding job making a very tight assignment to write this book within a year actually possible. So thanks to all the Institute staff. And the last and among the most important people I want to thank before I begin my little remarks is John Jackson, who's here from the Coors Foundation. John had an idea that somebody ought to speak up for the importance of freedom to the future of philanthropy. And he had the courage to look around and see how that could come true, and then to figure out how to make such a piece of work happen. So I'm deeply grateful to John, and I'd like to ask you all to thank him with me. Thank you, John. These are ideas a lot of us get, and you get a really compelling idea, and then you go and have lunch and get over it, because making it happen is way too complicated. But David Blankenhorn and John Jackson aren't that kind of person, and we're all very much for the better, especially me. So great thanks. The argument in this book is precisely the importance of freedom to the future of philanthropy. Before that statement means anything, you'd have to want to think about how important philanthropy is to the future of this democracy. And to think about that, you'd have to say, well, how important has it been? And if I tell you right off the bat that no one here present, and if Bill Gates were here, he'd be included, no one here present has not been a recipient of American philanthropy. Now, you may tell me you didn't have a scholarship, and you may tell me that you never needed a spin by the soup kitchen when you were a little kid or a married person. But I would tell you that all through your life, you have shown up in doctors' offices, in lawyers' offices, you have shown up in all sorts of professional settings, and some of them pastoral and religious settings, where the person who brought you what you needed was a person who seemed to just have a name tag, but the name tag should have said, so-and-so, brought to you by, and the list of people who contributed to that person's education and enabled that person to grow to be the doctor who would attend to you or to one of your children, or the lawyer who would help you figure out a complicated problem or advance an important idea. Well, you get my drift. No matter what field you're in, you have been surrounded by people whose human capital was developed by donors whose names aren't on their name tag. But from now on, whenever you see a name tag, I want you to see the rest of the ribbon that says the brought to you by. Whenever you enter a hospital, or most buildings of the arts and entertainment and aesthetics, those buildings were brought to you by. And by the way, when you just walk down the street, and most of you can do that better than I can, as you can see, but that's okay. That's partially because none of you had polio. And you didn't give that to yourself, and that didn't happen from the pharmaceutical industry by itself. That happened from hundreds of millions of American citizens who joined together to collect money a dime at a time. And that could only happen because this is a country where everybody takes philanthropy seriously. And people had an idea, the first time in human history. Maybe if a set of people get together and they decide to fund science, it would be possible to actually get after the disease and knock it out. Imagine people thinking in 1933 that individual gifts freely offered by individual people who were just stepping out barely in 33 from the Great Depression, they were asked to just give a dime. And they did. They collected from our fellow citizens for our well-being today in 2010, 4 billion dimes. That's a lot of dimes. There weren't big foundations giving away huge amounts of money. The government didn't put any money into that effort. And that's why we and our children, my grandchildren, whom some of you just saw, that's why they and you and I didn't get polio. So when I say that we're all recipients of philanthropy, if you ever took an antibiotic, antibiotics, first research was done by a philanthropist. If you ever have had an imaging routine with an MRI, or all of the initial research on that crazy field was done by these crazy people who decide that they're going to give their own money to make something amazing happen. Child labor, I could go on and on. You could see I teach this, and I'm grateful some of my students are here. But what I want to say to you is this country and its entrepreneurial energy, its idealism and its optimism are grounded in the assets of American philanthropy, freely expressed by donors who have all sorts of ideas. One of the great glories of American philanthropy is its diversity. People are funding all kinds of things, and they're funding things that seem crazy at the time. But that's only because everybody else couldn't see the future the same way as a philanthropist could, who could sit with an entrepreneur and say, really, you think it's possible that if we gave you some money, you could do a prototype and make a machine that would see better than an X-ray? And those 3 young scientists who came here from Germany told that to Mr. Rockefeller. He didn't understand the physics, frankly, that they were trying to explain to him. But he gave them the initial investment. And they produced, within a year and a half, the electron microscope. And that transformation of seeing is the seed of all the imaging technology. And the last of those 3 fellows, in his late 80s, just died last year. So philanthropy is at the core of our industrial productivity, it's at the core of our health, and it's at the core of who we are as a people. We invest in each other, in human capital, all those scholarships, all those new schools, K through 12, and in physical capital, all the buildings I referred to, and in intellectual capital, imaging machines. An attack on a virus. What? So that's the first thing to tell you. And the second thing to tell you is American philanthropy can't exist in a framework of coercion or loss of autonomy. Foundations and individuals need to be free to follow their dream. We know that that's what's best for our economy. If each company can try to make it work, to see if the marketplace of ideas is going to prove them successful or not quite, in which case it doesn't work. So that great investment that our forefathers made, our founders made, in designing a government that would challenge citizens just like us and like people we know, to invest in each other. That's what we are protecting. We're respecting that past, understanding its impact on us right now, the fact that we're not sicker, that we have antibiotics, and then understanding the impact for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. That's what we're protecting when we say we don't need legislative incursions on philanthropic freedom. It's America's great asset. No other country in the world has this kind of an asset that has grown so big and powerful that it is called the third sector. It's the third structure in society. There's government, commerce and industry, corporations, and the nonprofit sector, which is funded by philanthropists who develop whole new structures within our country. So Philanthropy Unbound has a title you've already figured out the meaning of from what I've just said. And what I've done in the last couple of chapters is challenge us to think that with this amount of freedom, what if philanthropy could, respecting all of its diversity and all of the diversity in donor intent, decide that this might be a moment when we could do two things. One, really look at what needs to be attended to in American society. What if philanthropy could change society so that we could really address childhood poverty? And in addressing childhood poverty and ridding the nation of the most devastating elements of childhood poverty, we could return $500 billion a year to the economy. Wouldn't we want to do that? I mean, there are lots of different ways people have proposed to deal with the deficit. But what if we were to say we would all give a bit more, we'd get a lot more people to give more, middle income and upper middle income people who aren't maybe doing as much as we wish they were, and get that to be focused on a marketplace of ideas to attend to what is really a third world situation for the bottom 15% of our population. We could make a big difference. The second idea is how could we engage an even larger percentage of the population in creative philanthropy? We need people to have more options, and I won't talk a lot about that, but we can create more options than simply making a check. And there's a whole group that I'm working with that will be trying to make that happen that I don't even think David knows about yet. But the philanthropic sector has another whole gift to bring the economy. It's been bringing gifts to the economy, but there's much more that we can do. But we cannot do it if the government, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, are tangling the legs of the fast runner that is American philanthropy. And American philanthropy, as we know it, expresses the core of our culture, that we are committed to equality, to justice, and to all men are created equal and endowed with the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that we're all responsible in our little platoons to go around making it better. We need to be free to do that as we see it. And Philanthropy Unbound makes that argument and might give you some quotes when you want to go out and convince other people. So thank you, David.